My father called me every single day for 30 years. Then he met her. And the calls stopped. What started instead were her calls. Her opinions. Her presence in every conversation, every decision, every moment that was supposed to be between me and my father. I tried to be patient for 2 years. And then I said something my father never thought his daughter would say to him. And everything changed. Welcome to Haely Stories. This is the place where you will find real and emotional women's stories that will touch your heart, make you feel seen, and remind you that you are never alone in what you are going through. If that is something you need in your life, then like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell icon so you never miss a single story. Now let me tell you about the 2 years I spent losing my father to someone else and the day I finally decided I was done losing quietly. My name is Rachel Sias and I am 30 years old. Want to start by telling you about my father because he is the center of this story and because the man I am going to describe to you in a moment is not who he has always been. Understanding who he was before helps you understand what it meant when he became someone different and why father's name is Thomas. He is 58 years old and he spent most of my childhood being exactly the kind of father that daughters write about when they are asked to describe someone who made them feel safe. He was present. He was consistent. He showed up for things that other fathers missed. School plays. Parent-teacher meetings. Saturday morning breakfasts that were just the two of us because he thought it was important that we had time that was only ours. Why parents divorced when I was 12. It was not a dramatic divorce. Two people who had grown into different people over 15 years of marriage and had the good sense and the genuine mutual respect to acknowledge it without destruction. They remained on good terms. They co-parented with a grace that I did not fully appreciate until I was old enough to understand how rare it was and why mother remarried when I was 16. I liked her husband. He was kind and unassuming and he never tried to replace my father and that made it easy to make room for him and why father did not date for a long time. 14 years. I watched him build a full and contented life that did not center on romantic partnership and I respected him for it. He had his work, which he loved. He had his friendships. He had me, and then, 2 years ago, he met Sandra. Sandra is 54 years old and she is the kind of woman who fills rooms with her personality in a way that some people find magnetic and I found, from the very beginning, slightly suffocating. I want to be fair to her. I have thought hard about being fair to her because I think fairness matters even when you are telling a story about someone who has made your life difficult. Sandra is not a bad person. She is not cruel or malicious or intentionally harmful. What she is someone who has no clear sense of where she ends and other people begin. She is interested in everything. She has opinions about everything. She involves herself in everything with a warmth and an energy that presents itself as love and functions, in practice, as a complete inability to allow anyone around her any space. And why father fell in love with her quickly and completely in the way that people fall in love when they have been alone for a long time and someone arrives who pays them full and enthusiastic attention. I understood it. I did not begrudge him it. What I began to struggle with was what happened to my relationship with my father after Sandra arrived in it. The daily calls that had been between my father and me became calls that Sandra was always on. She would pick up when I called his phone, explaining brightly that they were together, which meant they were always together. She would contribute to conversations that were not hers to contribute to. She would offer opinions on situations I had shared with my father privately, which meant he had shared them with her, which meant nothing between us was private anymore, and why father seemed not to notice. Or he noticed and found it endearing. I could not tell which was worse. Spent the first year telling myself it was an adjustment. New relationships change the dynamic between parents and adult children. That is normal. Sandra was new and enthusiastic and my father was happy and I told myself that things would settle, that she would find her own space and stop filling mine, that the boundaries would establish themselves naturally over time. They did not establish themselves naturally, they got worse. Sandra started calling me directly. Not to arrange things or convey information. To talk. Long calls, warm and friendly in tone, about my life and my relationships and my work and my feelings about things, covering territory that I would have shared with my father and had not shared with her and had not invited her into. I was polite. I was always polite. I answered her questions and I kept the calls short when I could, and I told myself it was fine. She started giving me advice. Unsolicited, enthusiastic, detailed advice about decisions I was making, about my career, about a relationship I was in at the time, about how I managed my time and my money and my life. All of it framed as love. All of it landing as intrusion. I talked to my father about it once, gently, at the end of the first year. I said, "Dad, I feel like Sandra is very involved in things that I would normally share only with you." He said, "She loves you, Rachel. She just wants to be part of your life." I said, "I know. But I would like some things to stay between us." He said, "She means well. Try to give her a chance." I gave her another year. The second year was harder, not because Sandra became more aggressive. Because I became more tired. There is a particular exhaustion that comes from managing someone else's presence in your life when you have not invited that presence and cannot seem to reduce it without a confrontation you are not ready to have. Every call became something I had to prepare for. Every family occasion became something I had to navigate. I started avoiding calls from my father because I knew Sandra would be there and I did not have the energy for it, and then I started missing my father, not the man who was currently in my life. The man who had been. The one who called me every morning and asked about my day and remembered the details of things I had told him weeks ago and made me feel, consistently and without effort, like I was the most important person in his world. That man had not disappeared. But he had become harder to reach. There was always someone between us now. Someone warm and well-meaning and completely unable to stop herself from being in the middle of everything. I missed my father. That missing was what finally moved me, not anger. Not a specific incident. Just the accumulated weight of 2 years of missing someone who was technically still there. Called my father on a Tuesday evening and I asked if we could talk. Just the two of us. I asked specifically. I said, "Dad, can we talk without Sandra on the call?" He said, "She is right here. I do not want her to feel excluded." I said, "Dad, I am asking for one conversation with my father alone." He said, "Rachel, she is part of my life now. You need to accept that," and something that had been bending for 2 years straightened. I did not say it on that phone call. I took 3 days. I thought about what I wanted to say and what I wanted to achieve and what the honest truth was about where I stood and what I needed. I wrote things down and crossed them out and wrote them again. I called my father on a Friday afternoon. Sandra answered. I said, "Sandra, I need to speak with my father, please." She said, "Of course, we are just," I said, "I love you. I have always loved you and I am not going anywhere and nothing I am about to say changes that. But I need to tell you what the last 2 years have been like for me because I do not think you know." And then I told him. Clearly and honestly and without dramatizing anything. I told him about the calls and the advice and the feeling of having no private space with my own father. I told him about missing him. I told him about avoiding his calls because I did not have the energy to manage Sandra's presence on top of missing him. I told him that I was not asking him to choose between us. But I was asking him to understand that the way things were was not working for me and that I needed it to change. And then I said the part that I had thought about most carefully. I said, "Dad, if things cannot change, if Sandra is always going to be in the middle of our relationship without any space for just us, then I think we need to take a step back from contact for a while. Not forever. But until I can figure out how to be in this without losing myself in it." He was quiet for a long moment, then he said, "Are you giving me an ultimatum?" I said, "I am telling you the truth about where I am. What you do with it is your choice." And why father did not respond well immediately. He said I was being unfair to Sandra. He said she had done nothing wrong. He said I was asking him to manage his relationship to accommodate my comfort and that was not reasonable. I listened to all of it, then I said, "Dad, I have spent 2 years accommodating. 2 years of being polite and patient and giving chances. I am not asking you to stop loving Sandra. I am asking you to also love me in a way that includes some space that is only ours. If that is not something you are willing to do, then I need to know that." He said he needed to think. I said, "Of course. Take the time you need. He ended the call. I sat in my apartment afterward and I felt the particular feeling of having said a true and difficult thing. And not yet knowing what it would cost. It was not comfortable. But it was honest. And I had been not honest about this for 2 years, and the not honesty had cost me more than the honesty was going to do. And why father called me back 2 days later. He called on a Sunday morning, which was when he used to call me every week before Sandra noticed the timing. I think he chose it deliberately, he said. I talked to Sandra. I said, okay, he said. I told her what you said. About the calls. About feeling like there was no space for just us. I said, how did she respond? He said, she cried. She said she did not know she had been doing that. She said she was trying to be part of the family and she had not understood that she was overwhelming you. I was quiet for a moment, said, I also did some thinking of my own. About the last 2 years. About whether I had been paying attention to what was happening with you and me. He paused, he said, I think I stopped paying attention, Rachel. I was so happy and I was so focused on Sandra and on this new part of my life that I stopped paying attention to what was happening with you. And I am sorry for that. I did not say anything for a moment. Then I said, that is what I needed to hear, Dad, he said. I know it is. I should have heard it sooner. I should not have needed you to say it quite so clearly before I understood. I said, you heard it now, he said. I heard it now. Sandra called me 2 days after my father's call, answered with some caution. I did not know what version of Sandra I was going to get, and I had prepared myself for defensiveness or hurt or the particular kind of warmth that functions as pressure. What I got was none of those things, she said. Rachel, I owe you an apology. I said. Okay, she said. I have been thinking about what your father told me and about my own behavior over the past 2 years, and I think I owe you a genuine and straightforward apology without any explanation attached to it. So, I am sorry. I invaded your space. I did not respect the boundaries of your relationship with your father. I made myself present in places where I had not been invited, and I told myself it was love when it was actually something I need to look at more honestly in myself. Sat with that for a moment. It was a good apology. A real one. The kind that does not immediately ask for something in return. I said, I appreciate that, Sandra. Genuinely, she said, I am not going to promise I will be perfect. I have a way of taking up space that I am working on. But I wanted you to know that I heard what you said and I am taking it seriously. I said, that means a lot. We talked for a few more minutes. Carefully. Honestly. Like two people who had not quite been honest with each other before and were trying something new. It was a beginning. Small and imperfect. But real things changed after those conversations. Slowly and imperfectly but genuinely. My father started calling me on Sunday mornings again. Just him. He told Sandra these were his calls with Rachel and she respected that. I know it took effort on both their parts and I am grateful for the effort. The calls were different at first. Slightly careful. Both of us aware of the conversation we had just had and navigating around it. But gradually they became something closer to what they had been. He asked about my life and remembered the details and followed up on things I had told him weeks before. Was still my father. He had just, for a while, forgotten to also be my father while he was being Sandra's partner. He remembered again. Sandra and I developed a different relationship too. Not the close and warm relationship she had been trying to force into existence from the beginning. Something more honest than that. Something that had actual space in it because it had not been crammed full of her enthusiasm before it had a chance to grow naturally. She and I have coffee sometimes. Once a month or so. She asks about my life and I ask about hers and we talk like two people who are finding their way towards something real rather than performing a closeness that does not yet exist. Tea is better. Genuinely better, not because I gave an ultimatum and won something. Because I said the truth and the truth gave everyone involved the information they needed to make different choices. There was a moment, about 3 months after our difficult phone call, that I want to tell you about because I think it is the most important part of the story and why Father and I were having dinner together. Just the two of us. He had suggested it and I had said yes immediately, and we had gone to a restaurant we used to go to when I was in my 20s. a quiet Italian place that had not changed much, and we had eaten pasta and talked for 2 hours. At the end of dinner he put down his fork and looked at me. He said, "I want to say something." I said, "Okay." He said, "I am proud of you for what you said to me. I know it was not easy. I know I did not make it easy with my first response. But I want you to know that what you did took courage and that it made things better and that I am glad you did it." I said, "I was scared, Dad." He said, "I know. That is why it took courage." He said, "I never want you to be scared to tell me the truth. Even when the truth is hard to hear. Even when my first response is not good. I need you to keep telling me the truth because you are my daughter and your truth matters to me more than my comfort." Looked at my father across that restaurant table and I saw the man who had called me every morning for 30 years and shown up for the school plays and made Saturday breakfasts that were only ours. He had not gone anywhere. He had just needed to be reminded that I was still there too. I'm 30 years old and I told my father that if things did not change I needed to step back from our relationship. It was the hardest thing I have said to anyone I love. It was also the most necessary. I have learned something through this that I want to share because I think it applies to more situations than just mine. Loving someone does not mean accepting anything they do without comment. It does not mean absorbing the consequences of their choices without telling them what those consequences are. It does not mean being so afraid of upsetting someone that you disappear yourself in order to keep the peace. Real love includes honesty. Difficult honesty. The kind that risks the relationship in order to save it. I risked my relationship with my father by telling him the truth about what the last 2 years had felt like. And that risk was what made it possible for things to actually change. If I had continued being polite and patient and quietly miserable, nothing would have changed. My father would have continued not seeing what was happening. Sandra would have continued not knowing she was doing it. And I would have continued losing something precious one phone call at a time. I said the hard thing. And the hard thing worked, not because ultimatums always work. They do not. But because the truth, said clearly and with love, gives people the information they need to make better choices. And some people, given that information, will make those choices, and my father is one of those people. I always knew he was. I just had to be brave enough to find out. My name is Rachel Sias. I am 30 years old and my father chose his girlfriend over me, so I gave him an ultimatum he never expected, and he chose us both. That is my story. Was so afraid of losing my father that I nearly lost him anyway. By staying quiet. By being patient. By slowly disappearing. The day I said the hard thing out loud was the day I stopped disappearing. Thank you for listening. This is Haely Stories. We will see you in the next one.